You're looking at pictures of Times Square just moments ago. The city that never sleeps, largely deserted after Sandy, one of the biggest storms ever to hit the United States, pounded the East Coast, flooding large parts of New York. More than 5.5 million people across a dozen states have been left without power, with over 1 million ordered to evacuate. Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. now lie in the storm's path. More on the impact of Superstorm Sandy in just a moment. First, a big morning here in Europe for corporate results. Here's a quick summary of the major news. UBS to slash 10,000 jobs and wind down its fixed income business. The Swiss bank to refocus on its wealth management activities. Current investment bank co-head Carsten Kengeter will leave the board to head the discontinued unit. German rival Deutsche, third quarter earnings up a fifth to 1.1 billion euros, in line with expectations. Sales and trading at the group's investment bank jumping 67%. Unusually strong refining margins helping to boost Q3 profits of BP, the oil major beating expectations with a profit of $5.2 billion. And German retailer Metro sees its profits slump more than a third as cash-strapped consumers in southern and eastern Europe rein in spending. Let's get to Barclays' William Hobbs, head of equity strategy there. Morning to you. Well, the investment bank earnings look pretty good. Retailers don't look so good. What's your general take on earnings right now?
Yeah, it's been mixed both sides of the Atlantic, really. But I think the important thing to know is we didn't actually have that greater hopes for this earnings season anyway. We knew that Q3 was a pretty poor quarter economically. Actually, relative to expectations, we knew that China and Europe were amongst the poorest regions. The fact that those companies that are sensitive to those regions are having a slightly softer time shouldn't really be any great surprise to us, I think.
You still positive on equities generally?
Yeah, very much so. Valuations, I think, look sufficiently cheap to digest both the necessary earnings downgrades, because Q4 and 2013 estimates still look too high, but also to deliver a decent positive return for investors.
I want to get your take on the UBS story. Clearly, this was flagged. Is it the start of similar strategic shifts at other banks?
I certainly think that chief executives around the banking sector are going to be watching with great interest. The market seemed to like the move. And actually, the results from UBS's investment banking division didn't look that poor this morning. They're about middle of the pack in terms of what we've seen from the global banking sector. But it's pretty widely acknowledged that UBS is subscale in fixed interest currencies and commodities. And a focus on wealth management is certainly going to make their return on equity targets easier to hit, I guess.
Does the storm for you in wealth management, does the storm change anything for you and your investors?
Not especially. I guess it slows down. It slows down what we're seeing in terms of reporting season reaction, but apart from that, not too much, I think.
All right. Well, many thanks. Apple has announced its biggest shake-up in senior management in a decade. Software chief Scott Forstall, once billed as a possible CEO but responsible for the launch of the flawed mapping software, will go, as will head of retail John Browett. Browett, former Dixon CEO, is only 6 months into the job, but had apparently riled staff by reducing headcount in his unit. Analysts say the changes are a sign CEO Tim Cook is now stamping his authority on the business. More earnings out in Asia. Let's get to Tara in Hong Kong. Standard Chartered on track for a 10th straight year of record earnings, Tara.
That's right, Axel. It does look pretty good for Standard Chartered. 10th straight year, as you mentioned, though it looks like the year full will be in single digits. There is a bit of a sting in the tail. Earnings at the bank probably would have risen by at least 10%, except for that $340 million settlement that Standard Chartered had to pay to New York regulators, who were threatening, if you remember, to strip the bank of its license over allegations of transactions it did with Iran. So that did put a damper on the bottom line, but Standard Chartered is one of the few banks that's actually still hiring around the world. They're expecting to add another 1,500 jobs, they told us a while back.
All right, and let's get a quick word on the Bank of Japan. Markets seem unimpressed by the second round of stimulus.
Well, they are unimpressed, and there's also this growing worry that Japan is headed back towards recession. Today, more stimulus, as you mentioned, is the second straight month that the BOJ has been increasing its asset buying. This was expected by the market, so they were disappointed of nothing great. But they did make a rare gesture today, and that was that the government and the BOJ issued a joint statement. They pledged to actually combine efforts to overcome deflation. Now, the worrying aspect of that is, in essence, they're admitting that they actually missed their 1% inflation target, and things are looking a little bit difficult for Japan's economy. We've seen some very weak data coming out of there, especially in manufacturing and exports, Axel.
Okay, Sarah, many thanks. Now, let's get back to the storm slamming the U.S. East Coast. Stock markets will be closed for a second day, the first time in over a century that weather has closed Wall Street for more than 24 hours. The New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ say they intend to reopen for the month's final trading day, Wednesday, weather permitting. Bond markets will also close today, again with the aim of reopening tomorrow. Analysts estimate banks and trading firms could lose tens of millions of dollars in revenue. Some companies have postponed their quarterly reports. At least 6 have delayed IPOs, while Facebook employees have been prevented from selling shares after a trading lockup expired. That is it for now. I'll leave you with a selection of stormy images by Reuters photographers on the US East Coast. Tourists shielding themselves from rain in Times Square, a submerged gas station, a taxi on the flooded streets of Brooklyn, a boarded-up pizza restaurant in New Jersey, and finally sandbags blocking the entrance to the New York Stock Exchange. That's it. I'm Axel Threlfall. This is Reuters.